So the third largest economy in the entire world has just passed a law that makes me believe that I think Japan is about to make a move into Bitcoin. So today we're going to be discussing what this recent law was, why Japan's largest energy company has been mining Bitcoin since 2022, and the interesting timing of this most recent announcement as Japan has just slipped into a recession and been overtaken by Germany to become the third largest country. Why is Bitcoin at an all-time high? Well, to explain all of that, I am going to share my screen and we're going to start looking at this article right here. So we can see Japan greenlights a bill that would allow investment firms to hold crypto. Yes, I know they use the dirty word crypto, but you're going to want to have a look at what else was in this bill. This is very interesting, okay? So the government's allowed this bill and it would permit investment limited partners to acquire and hold quote unquote Bitcoin, indicating a shift in the country's regulatory framework. Okay, now again, this is interesting because it is a pivot by Japan. Okay, lots of Southeast Asian countries are making the same pivot, but I'm very interested by the timing of this announcement. So obviously the US spot ETFs have been launched for around 4 weeks now, okay? So the US spot ETFs have broken all sorts of records and we've watched them accumulate over 100,000 net new Bitcoin, okay? We know that Grayscale sold 160,000 coins and these 9 ETFs have bought over 270,000, but on net, 100,000 new coins have flowed into America. Now, this is important because we have to start thinking about who holds the majority of Bitcoin around the world. We know that Hong Kong is actively trying to open up a Bitcoin spot ETF as we speak, okay? They've been trying to accelerate the current bill that is being talked about over there in Hong Kong. And now we have this news coming out about Japan, okay? Is this the Bitcoin hash wars that everybody's been talking about? Is this indicating a race to accumulate Bitcoin? I think so, and we're going to talk about why that is and the evidence I have to back up that claim when we talk about Japan's largest energy producer in a moment. But I want to have a look at this here. So this is ranking the largest fiat currencies around the world. We can see, I don't know why the Chinese yuan is number 1 on this list. I think this has to be a mistake. Let me know in the comments down below whether you think this is a mistake or not. But the yuan is not bigger than the US dollar. So I don't know why it is number 1. But what I'm more interested about is look at number 4 on this list. So Japan was the 3rd largest economy in the world from a GDP standpoint. But the Japanese yen is now the 4th largest fiat currency in terms of circulating supply. And I'm assuming this would also take into account market cap and how much volume is actually traded internationally. But I want to point your attention towards number 15 on that list. Bitcoin is already the 15th largest currency in the world, okay? There's not many other currencies that are larger than Bitcoin. Sorry, I'm burping on the live stream. That's terrible. We have the Taiwan dollar, we have the Russian ruble, the Australian dollar, the Brazilian real, Hong Kong dollar, Canadian dollar, and Bitcoin is slowly climbing up this leaderboard. And as it does, it's becoming absolutely undeniable to ignore. Now, this gets us into talking about Japan's largest power company and what they've been doing recently. So their largest power company in the country is called TEPCO. Okay, now this company is like a $700 or $800 billion company from memory. And we can see here, TEPCO Power Grid is deploying Bitcoin mining operations across Japan in a partnership with a local semiconductor company to capitalize on excess power, okay? So again, that's huge, but there's a couple of important points there I want to draw your attention towards. TEPCO is in a partnership with a local semiconductor company. So we now have 2 major industries in Japan signing off on a partnership that involves Bitcoin mining. Okay, again, this is very interesting. Do you think these major industries would be doing this in Japan if the government wasn't okay with Bitcoin adoption happening in the country. I'll let you guys think about that. Let's move on. TEPCO is joining a major global energy companies in jumping in on Bitcoin mining bandwagon. A common denominator for most of these companies mining Bitcoin is the need to monetize excess power, something Bitcoin mining does very well. Okay, this is a great article. I could not agree more. But I think it doesn't just come back to the fact that Bitcoin is great for monetizing stranded power. I think there's more to this story. Okay, I really do think there is. And this is where we start looking at the economic situation in Japan. Let's start talking about Japan's economy. This headline here pretty much tells you everything you need to know. The Japanese economy slips into recession, and they are now the number 4th in the ranking order, so to say, of the largest economies around the world. So Japan was the number 3 top dog behind America and China for a long time until just recently, literally this week. Okay, so we can have a look at it. On an annualized basis, GDP fell 0.4% in October through December 2023 after a revised 3.3% decline in the previous 3 months. Again, this is interesting because let's not forget about these revised figures. So our economists in Japan came back and revised a previous figure to actually say, yeah, you know what, GDP was 3.3% lower in the negative. So again, very interesting that any of the data you see today, it's probably going to be revised down lower later in 3 months' time. This is how, we're gaslit into believing everything is all good. But I want to move on here and have a look at the geopolitical implications of this and how it could potentially be related to Bitcoin. So with the release of Japan's end-of-year GDP, it has ceded its spot as the 3rd largest economy behind the US and China, a position that it had held since China overtook them in 2010. So Japan has been the 3rd largest economy for 14 years. Not anymore. Germany now holds that distinction in terms of US dollars. Okay, so they do actually account for US dollars. Interesting. So Germany, which are the typical currency used in global trade and finance. Japan could, in the coming years, lose its hold on number 4 as its shrinking population will struggle to keep up with the growth of India, the world's most populous country. So I'm assuming here that India is actually the number 5 on the list of the world's largest economies by GDP. Japan has now sunk to number 4. Okay, that's really interesting. But something else actually happened in Japan this week. And again, I always look at the timing of these things, guys. I don't think events just happen coincidentally. Okay, I think timing is interesting, which is why I'm showing you all of these different articles today and why I think they could maybe be related to each other. So let's jump into what I think is the most important chart, and that is actually one of, I'm going to tell you about it in a moment. It is the Nikkei. I want to quickly hit the live chat. We've got my man Jason watching from the start, mate. Put it on 2x speed. I'm a little bit of a slow talker. Who else watches YouTube videos in 2x speed? I want to hear from you guys. But let's move on, and I'm going to show you the chart of the Nikkei. Okay, so I think I pronounced that one correctly. But if I would actually zoom out here, Japan is famous for having this enormous stock market bubble in the 1980s. And the Nikkei was an incredibly well-performing asset. It was the best-performing asset for decades. And this chart doesn't do the Nikkei justice, okay? If you put it on, I'm going to put it on regular. So I'm going to take the log scale off this, and you can see just how ridiculous the Nikkei looked during the 1970s and the 1980s. Have a look at it. It literally rallied from... about 7,000 on the Nikkei in 1982 to be worth 40,000 by 1989. So in 7 years, it essentially did around a 7x. It's about 650% if my dodgy maths does me correctly. But look at what happened after. The Nikkei went through an enormous correction. And I really should be sharing my screen right now. I'm sorry, guys. Producer Pam just walked in and kicked me on the side of the leg and said, "You're not sharing your screen, dumbass." So I'm sorry about that. Here we go. Good work, producer Pam. I'm sharing my screen now, and I'm not showing you the Bitcoin chart. I'm showing you the Nikkei chart. Okay, so we can see here. This was the rally I was talking about, where the Nikkei did a 7x in 7 years. This is on linear, so you can see just how bonkers that is, okay? But lots of people have talked about Japan for the past couple of decades and how they essentially saw a lost decade of growth. And that is because the Nikkei didn't actually it hasn't taken its all-time high until today. So it actually took the Nikkei 35 years to make a new all-time high. And this is taking into account for the fact that the money supply has been significantly increased over those past 35 years. So it's only just got its new all-time high back in nominal terms. Okay, so that kind of shows you how bad investing in the Nikkei has been over the past 30 years and in Japan in general since this kind of bubble popped. But now Japan is, the stock market's coming back a little bit, but the economy is going absolutely backwards, okay? Now, this is where I like to pop the tinfoil hat on and have a think about, okay, what is Japan's options here? What can they do? Is there a reason why they're allowing these large hedge funds and investment firms to actually buy some Bitcoin now? Is there a reason behind it? Is it because they don't want India and Germany to actually overtake them in terms of GDP? Okay, we got to think about it. I think the leaders of all of these countries around the world, I think they are very competitive. And obviously, I think their job depends upon the fact that their country's doing well in a GDP kind of terms, okay? And now it looks as if many countries around the world are actually slipping into recession. So Germany, country we mentioned today, who is now the third largest economy in the world, they've slipped into a recession recently. Japan, officially in a recession. The UK, officially in a recession. The EU, unofficially in a recession, but they have had 2 quarters of negative GDP growth in a row. We're going to talk about all of this in a video I have coming up, talking about whether Bitcoin can decouple from the markets when all of these global economies are actually going through a recession. So again, America right now is not in a recession. If you believe the government statistics, that's probably a topic for another day. But all of these other countries who are going for a recession, I think it's very interesting that for the first time in a while, these countries' economies and stock markets are actually at an all-time high when their economy is kind of crumbling. This is kind of more evidence of the fact that we're in this kind of massive everything bubble when the fundamentals of the economy simply don't matter anymore. And I think that maybe nations are coming to the realization that the performance of their country and the performance of their markets and how much capital they can attract internationally is now going to come down to not only their economic growth, but how they can actually position themselves strategically. So we are watching nation states like El Salvador and Argentina attract a lot of foreign international capital by how they're creating these strategic partnerships. And obviously, this is, in El Salvador's case, a lot of these strategic partnerships are coming from Bukele's bold leadership, okay? It's not just the Bitcoin standard he's implementing, but he's obviously cleaning up crime and essentially wiping out all taxes for any technology companies in the country. And this has given him the opportunity to meet global leaders like Javier Milei. Or recently, the Emirate of Qatar flew a private jet to little old El Salvador to meet Bukele. What did they talk about? I don't know, guys. You let me know. But is Qatar going to buy a shit ton of Bitcoin as well? Or is Qatar wanting to know how Bukele implemented this Bitcoin strategy? Just questions I'm going to leave to you guys for the end of today. Guys, I'm going to pause today's live stream there. I've done 4 live streams in the past 2 days. If you enjoyed this one, probably going to love the one we did about 3 days ago, talking about the geopolitics of nation-state adoption. I'm going to pop a link to that one right about there once the live stream is finished. And with all that said, see you guys tomorrow.